All right. Picture a man. It's about maybe 10, 11 o'clock at night, New York docks, 1855, 170 years ago. He's scared. He's climbing out of a boat he's been hiding in. There are men on the docks looking for people like him. These are white men. These are slave hunters. They can pick up really any black man, any black woman, any black child, and take them away, and then they have to prove that they aren't slaves. So there are other black people on the dock, but they're hiding. You can't see very many people who are like him in any way. It's all unfriendly faces as far as he's concerned. Any white person who turns him in will get a bounty. There's nowhere to run. He's slinking along the docks.
And he's got the water at his back.
Yeah. And a hand grabs his shoulder. He turns around, and it's a black face, so he knows he's all right. That's Louis Napoleon. Louis Napoleon brings him back to the offices of the Tribune newspaper. They've closed for the night. Takes him inside. And there's one of the editors at the table talking with a woman. They turn around. The woman is Harriet Tubman. The man is my ancestor, Sidney Howard Gay. This isn't his story, but this is how I know about this story. So I'm going to be talking about that history today and some of my family connections to that. And we're going to talk about who Sidney Howard Gay was, and then the much larger story of his role as a station master on the Underground Railroad and what that meant.
Fascinating. Well, let's go.
All right. Hi, Eric.
Josh. It's Friday, February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone.
Happy Valentine's Day. All right. So, Sidney Howard Gay was one of the editors for the Tribune, working with Horace Greeley, and he would work during the day, and then he would work all night on an anti-slavery newspaper, and working as a station master on the Underground Railroad. So he basically never slept. And he wrote all this down, and so we actually have his papers and we have records of all of this.
When you say we, who's we?
We, humanity. The papers are at Columbia University. Part of family history, I have some letters and things from him and stuff like that. But the main history he wrote down is available to the public. It's online. It's digital. It's wonderful. And so he would work with Harriet Tubman, who was he called the General. And she was basically, the field agents. And Louis Napoleon was working directly with him, also basically a field agent. He was the guy in the chair. So in the movies, there's the guy in the chair with the field agents actually doing all the work and all the scary stuff. And there's the guy sitting there on the headset telling them where to go and what to do. He was that guy. He might have been the first of those guys. Everyone else was trying to carry messages on by horseback. And he explained that if you used the telegraph, you could get messages faster than the slave catchers could locate people they were hunting.
Wow, we were in an era when that needed to be explained.
It needed to be explained. Yeah. He was in newspapers, so he understood how powerful the telegraph could be for getting news from one place to the next, and no one else was living in that world. So he was cutting-edge technology. You could just send a telegraph and we'd get the information much faster.
That also, I bet, cost money.
So his job was basically logistics. He was the guy in the chair. He made all the arrangements happen.
Just logistics, not money?
He also did fundraising. He didn't have that much money, but he would go around and give talks and do fundraising. And they also did trolling of people. So he and Horace Greeley, the editor of the Tribune, which was a liberal paper, Republican, which meant anti-slavery, and would put on these things where there would be the equivalent of a Trump rally, a whole bunch of, MAGA heads who hate slaves and hate black people, who would get together and they would basically have these sort of mobs, and Greeley would say, "Yeah, let's hold a debate. We'll get the best white spokesman you can find, and we'll have them talk to a former slave, as we're abolitionists and we know some of those, and we're going to hear them talk together." And the MAGA people are like, "Yeah, we're going to say." We can control the whole dialogue, as we see Fox do all the time. You just shout over them. You have the mob on your side. You get it in your venue. It doesn't matter how smart the other person is. You're gonna crush them. We know how this works. And Horace Greeley's like, "Yep, we'll do that." So Horace Greeley and Sidney Howard Gay go with a former slave to this MAGA rally, basically. Put him up there.
Do you know where it was? When this was?
This is in Lower Manhattan. This is 1850s.
Okay, 1850s Lower Manhattan. All right.
Yeah. So most of what I'm setting is happening during a single year, 1855. Okay. So 170 years ago. This is the anniversary. And I'm talking about my grandmother's grandfather, and so this is personal history for me as well. I heard some of these stories firsthand from someone who had them firsthand. I've also gone and done research. So anyway, they're going up in front of this MAGA crowd, stand back, former slave is talking, and basically he straightens up, and it's Frederick Douglass, and so he's one of the greatest orators of all time, and he blows them away. The crowd is just slack-jawed. They were probably slack-jawed to start with, but they don't know what to say. He's making classical references and biblical references, and he's talking philosophy, and he's just blowing them away. And they can't say anything for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes, and 15 minutes in, shouts start, and the crowd's getting restless, and they're like, "We've been had."
Hey, this guy's smart.
Yeah, exactly.
He's got something to say.
Wait a second. And so that's when they, Sidney and Horace Greeley, rush him off stage and into a stagecoach that, as again, the guy in the chair has arranged, and they rush away from there before the crowd can get them. They had it all planned from the beginning.
They knew this would be the point. Yeah. That would be reached, and they would have to get away.
They were there to make a point. They were there to put something in the news the next day, and they were there to basically troll that whole crowd, and they knew it was going to end badly.
What year was this again?
1855.
So this was trolling in 1855.
This was trolling in 1855. Yeah, and no one saw it coming, and they made a clean getaway. And
is there a record of the speech?
There's a record that the speech exists. We have a record of speeches like that. I don't think we have that particular one.
All right.
But yeah,
interesting. All right.
So this is the kind of stuff they were doing. Horace Greeley is way more famous. He's the one who said, "Go west, young man." But they were working together. He was the owner of the paper, and so he was allowing. He was allowing Sidney Howard Gay to use the offices and the printing house area as stations on the Underground Railroad, as safe houses, essentially.
With plausible deniability for him, because he wasn't doing it.
And there's family stories of if they couldn't get the people out before the start of the workday. They had to get people out, and going up to upstate New York, which is where Frederick Douglass.
Wait, they were actually using the offices themselves as a way station for escaped slaves at night. Overnight.
Yeah.
And then during the day, people would come into the offices of the newspaper and not know that people had spent the night there.
Right, and so they'd be then on their way to upstate New York, and Frederick Douglass had a way station. Upstate New York, and they were sort of in a friendly competition who can get more people out, and so it was this whole thing moving people up to Canada.
Right, so you're literally working day and night.
He was literally working day and night.
This is a life's devotion.
Yeah, and there were times when they couldn't get people out, and so he would actually be hiding them in his office during the day, and there's like a family story of my great-great-grandmother coming in and saying hello, and he's like, there's people hiding over there. And
like an Anne Frank story.
Yeah, and we have the stories of from those families as well, because he kept records of everyone, and so some of the historians were able to track down the people he'd helped, and they're like, yeah, we have family stories of hiding in the office.
I'm sure that would be a family story that would last for generations.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is, while it's distant, it's also direct, and these are things that we have direct connections to.
Is this where we're headed? Anyway, that's premature.
Yeah, no. This is some of why I'm telling this story.
Yeah.
Is like we are in troubled times, and the slave catchers are coming, and we need to figure out what we're doing. But that's a separate issue. Yeah. So I didn't really want to tell Sidney Howard Gay's story. I just sort of wanted to introduce this, man I'm tremendously proud to be related to, as a way of getting into this story and say I do have this direct connection. But the story that I think we really need to hear is the story of Jane Johnson. I have a hard time remembering her name. It's so sort of normal. But Jane Johnson is a very important figure. If you Google her, you're going to find some person selling Bibles. It's not her.
Okay.
But she helped America understand what was going on with people trying to escape slavery. She was a slave. Her eldest son had been basically sold down the river. She thought she would never see him again. She had 2 younger sons, and her slaver, I've decided I like that word better than master. They were masters in no way. Mm-hmm. Her slaver was taking her north because he had just been appointed the sort of, I don't know, consular general or something like that to Nicaragua. And so he had to go north, get the papers, and then he was going down to Nicaragua, and he was bringing his slaves with him. And so he was bringing her and her 2 boys together. The boys, he thought might make it harder for her to escape. It's difficult to travel with children. And so they were, to a certain extent, hostages. And the idea was to not let them out of his sight and keep them locked up. In some accounts, they were confined on the boat. On another account, they were confined in a nearby hotel, but locked in. Mm-hmm. And Jane Johnson managed to get a message to one of the black porters. So there were people working everywhere who she could trust, and that was part of how this clandestine network worked. Mm-hmm. Was getting messages to spread, and he got it to. There was something called the Vigilance Committee. Sounds very right-wing and vigilante, but mm-hmm. at that point, these were people who were literally vigilant, waiting for the word. Mm-hmm. When someone was trying to escape, they were going to set things up.
Wow, the Vigilance Committee was a group of people waiting to hear of slaves wanting to escape.
Yes, exactly. And so Williamson was a man working for the Vigilance Committee, and he...
I'm sorry, that must have been an immensely dangerous and terrifying thing, because I'm sure there were slaves you couldn't trust.
Yeah.
And putting out a message like that could, if it fell into the wrong hands, would have terrible consequences.
Yeah. So he hears about this. He telegraphs Sidney Howard Gay. Sidney Howard Gay telegraphs to a man called Sims, who was also a station master on the Underground Railroad. Sims had been from a family of slaves that had gotten out, and he had dedicated his life not just helping people escape, but to documenting it all so that families could reunite. Because one of the biggest problems was families were getting split up, and when they would eventually escape, they had a hard time finding each other. So he documented everyone he was helping, and he documented the whole process. And so it's really interesting to see some of the documentation my relative had, and matching up with the documents he had. It was he was really dedicated to finding all the people, and keeping it. And so these are now families that exist 170 years later who are able to trace their family history back because he has these records. And so he was doing multiple jobs, not just being a station master, but also understanding his role as keeping the information coming.
Yeah.
And so the station masters were in many ways like CIA handlers. They have agents out there bringing information to them, and then they're collating that information and processing it in a way that gives them more power than just people talking directly to each other.
But also they had this magical power of, you're talking about this Jane Johnson got a message out, and all of those messages happened in that one night.
In that one night, yeah. All she had to do was whisper to a porter.
Which to most people in that day and age was inconceivable.
Yeah, exactly. So they're using cutting edge technology.
They had a technological advantage.
They really
like
did.
Wakanda or something.
No, it was cool. But so this is how they were working. And so Sims goes down on the docks, and they're trying to take Jane Johnson back up onto the boat, and they're going to take her away. And she's with her two children, and the slaver is there, Wheeler, and Sims says, "Do you want to be free?" And Jane Johnson says, "Yeah, I want to be free." And like, then come with me. The slaver tries to hit them with his cane, and two porters on the boat grab his arms so that he can't. Three others help take her away. So this is a network of black people working together to stop the slaver, with a white man who's basically an attorney and a black man who's running the station.
And remind me, where are we? Where is this?
We're now
place?
in Philadelphia. And so, okay, back it up a little bit. They were going up to Philadelphia to get these papers, and there were some problems with the way the law was working. Pennsylvania was a free state. If you stepped foot in Pennsylvania, you were free. But in the early, let's say 1790 or so, Philadelphia had been the capital, and so they had to have an allowance to allow slavers to bring their property, and not have it taken away instantly. So in Philadelphia, there was sort of a waiver for people to temporarily be able to do this.
There was a waiver in Philly to bring your slaves and have them still be your property, and then you can leave with them again.
Yes.
Just don't go anywhere else in the state.
Yeah. So Jane Johnson said, "No, I'm not a slave. I'm a free woman, and I'm standing in Pennsylvania, and I don't want to go back." And so they hustled her away. And
of course, if they had been in the South, they could have just been shot.
Yeah.
But that wasn't in the South. That was still in the North. And so, because of this, they could lay their hands as black people on a wealthy white person.
Well, it didn't go all that well. So Williamson, who is this white sort of an attorney, said, "Okay, you guys run." So Sims took her and ran, and he turned around and said, "Hi, I'm surrendering to the authorities."
A white guy said this.
Yes, and they arrested him and the five porters for robbery.
Yeah.
For assault and robbery.
So the porters were arrested.
Oh, they were arrested at this point.
They were free men.
Yes.
Who had jobs and probably responsibilities.
Yeah.
And now, because of their involvement in this, they were arrested.
Yeah. And Sims is gotten away with Jane Johnson, and they're not telling Williamson where they've gone, which was part of the plan from the beginning. Mm-hmm. Compartmentalization of knowledge.
Yeah.
There aren't really spy societies in the U.S., but this is how people were figuring out how to do this kind of stuff. They're like, we don't tell you what's going on, right. So you can't give it up.
You can't even give it up. Yeah.
You can't give it up. Well, Williamson had issues with a federal judge in the past over some of the same issues because he was always arguing slavery cases. And so the federal judge is like, "We're throwing the book at you. We're going to get you, we wrote a writ of habeas corpus. You must produce Jane Johnson. and we're going to get you for contempt of court if you don't turn her in. And he's like, can't do it. Don't know where she is. Nothing I can do. So they threw him in jail.
What about these porters?
They threw them in jail too. Everyone went to jail for 90 days. Or actually, Wheeler went for 90 days. I can't remember what. The porters hadn't been tried yet, so they were in... Okay, difference between jail and prison, but whatever. Yeah, anyway.
They were held for longer, I'm sure.
Well, they were all being held for the same amount of time because they're all in jail at the moment.
Right.
So, the federal judge hates Williamson and wants to get him, and is setting up a court hearing where he's being tried for theft. And Jane Johnson, with a friendly judge, writes a affidavit saying, I was not stolen. I was a free woman because I was standing in Pennsylvania and I declared I wanted to be here. And so therefore I could not have been property, so I can't have been stolen. And that gets turned into the federal judge, who says, this means nothing. This is gibberish. This is a legal document with no standing. You have to produce your witness. And so he had the courthouse surrounded with federal marshals. So there was no way Jane Johnson could get in there. And slaveholders everywhere, plus a rowdy MAGA-type crowd all around the courthouse. At the same time, the Pennsylvania has the Pennsylvania court system working for them. And they have state troopers, and they have an organization whose job it is to say, no, we're following Pennsylvania law, and she's a free woman.
Okay, wait. So who was surrounding the courthouse?
The federal marshals.
So there were literally federal marshals up against
State troopers.
Troopers.
Yeah.
And we're talking 1855.
Yeah, and everyone's armed.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
It's beginning, I mean, with what's happening, I mean, I have to interject right now that, like, what's happening right now in New York State, where they've literally asked for a doctor to be extradited, I mean, this is sounding too close to be... Anyway, go on. I'm sorry.
Anyway. So again, Sidney Howard Gay is doing all the logistics, and so he arranges for her to leave New York City, where she'd gotten away to, take a train down to Pennsylvania, get on a little, cab or whatever, little horse thing, pull up to the courthouse as one of several veiled abolitionist women who are going to be witnesses at the trials, because a lot of people are trying to get in there, and so there's lots of both sides are being represented in the crowd in the courthouse, and so these abolitionist women who are all veiled are going in with the state troopers, sort of pushing their way through the crowd to get them into the courthouse. Dramatic, like made for TV moment. They're like, you have to produce your witness. And so Jane Johnson flips back the veil, and she's there to testify that she was a free woman and she was not stolen. And the judge, according to like his own description of the what had been going on, cannot convict Williamson because he hadn't stolen her. Right. She was a free woman, and the law said this. And so even though it was a federal judge, he's like, well, I have to follow the law. But now his trap had been set. Jane Johnson was in the courthouse.
And now she had to get out.
And she had to get out. So it's surrounded by federal marshals and state troopers. The federal marshals are going to arrest her. And the slave hunters are going to take her away. But the state troopers just basically formed a phalanx around her and literally ran out of the courthouse with her right into a stagecoach that, again, had been prearranged. The stagecoach went around the block. She jumped into another stagecoach, which then went as fast as they could to a train. So the first stagecoach, if anyone was trying to follow it on horseback, got away without her in it. The second one dropped her at a train and then went away, so that anyone trying to follow them were following stagecoaches, and she was on a train. Again, all set up from New York City by Sidney Howard Gay, the man in the chair. Williamson was let go. Wheeler was not given any compensation because he did not have any property to be compensated for because she was a free woman. the abolitionist movement helped get her a boarding house where she helped escaped slaves in Boston. And so she became, her own sort of stop on the Underground
I'm fixated
Railroad.
on this. What happened to the porters?
So the porters, three of them were freed because they hadn't done anything. They had just helped a free woman walk down a gangplank.
Okay.
Two of them had actually held.
Right.
And they got a $10 fine in 9 days, and the abolitionists paid the fine, and they had to spend a week in jail. So yeah, they did get punished, but it wasn't bad, and the whole thing sort of is as close as you can get to a happy ending with these things. My relative had a nervous breakdown, but he kept going for a little bit longer. But you can't live that way without sleep. So he went 2 years.
I mean, there was a happy ending except for the fact that slavery existed.
Oh, and there's a civil war coming. No, there's a civil war coming, and this is all like. But in this one particular story, this was not just a happy ending, but this was written about at the time and became a something that was helping unify the country and see that the feds could come at you with armed marshals, and they could tell you what to do in your state. Even if you didn't believe in what they were doing. And
well, that surely sounds familiar. In fact, it does not just familiar. I mean, this is literally what we're facing in New York State today.
Right. And so this is the kind of stuff that was starting, armed insurrection. This was with John Brown. This was really starting. People were angry, and this helped fan those flames. Because they
shivers because we're going to need something like that.
Well, I don't want a civil war, but we need to see what's happening, and it was done in a way that involved modern technology and communication and reporters and attorneys and the court systems and federal marshals versus state troopers.
Every single thing that's being attacked and torn down right now.
Exactly. So. Yeah, Sidney Howard Gay was able to keep this up for about 2 years. And he'd been writing everything down that he was doing. Then in the family history, he sort of had a nervous collapse, as they say. And he stopped writing stuff down, but he was still very much in the abolition movement. And there's records of that, but we don't really know what was happening past that time.
But this is what it's going to take. This is going to take people devoting their lives to this. It's going to take people giving their lives for this. I mean, it's.
Yeah, I mean, the real ending of this period was when the Civil War started. In the early days of this Civil War, rich New Yorkers were paying poor Irish people. Poor Irish men to go fight for them and often die in the Civil War. And so Irish people were being both drafted and paid, so both conscription and being paid to go fight, and they were dying in large numbers. And they were then coming back from these battles and, not okay. And so the very large Irish immigrant population tried to secede, have Manhattan secede from the rest of the nation, and they were killing black people. They were lynching. There were lynch mobs.
When was this?
This is at the beginning of the Civil War. I think right after the Battle of Antietam. And
1865, 1866.
I'm terrible at that date. I didn't look that one up, but yeah,
right.
But yeah, we're decades later.
So you're talking about we're a decade or a decade and a half or 2 decades later than.
So we start at 1855, but this is still Sidney Howard Gay. He's still living in New York. He's still working for the same paper.
You're talking about Irish people wanting Manhattan to secede?
Yes.
And in battle with black people?
Well, murdering black people and in battle with the rest of the city. They're burning things. They're in battle with the police. No one knows what's going to happen.
This is before the Irish became the police?
This is before the Irish. They were kind of the police as well, but the police are backing off, the ones who are probably Irish.
Right.
And there's definitely that feeling. There's the feeling of a lot of rich white people, some of whom are pro-slavery, but the majority of the rich white people are abolitionists and against slavery, and the poor Irish people who are up in arms about that, and the police are like, we're backing off.
But you're saying that this was during the Civil War when the Irish were basically being paid and used as cannon fodder.
Yes.
And then there was an uprising over this during the Civil War?
Yeah, down in Lower Manhattan and in Staten Island.
Well, that's something I never learned in school.
And so my great-great-grandfather was in the newspaper offices. Horace Greeley fled, and he's like, you guys hang out here in the newspaper offices. And there's two different stories. In one of them, he stacked muskets against the wall, loaded muskets that were, ready to fire, so you could just fire one after the other, after the other. Another one of the stories is that they had these wooden troughs and Bugs Bunny style bombs, the round ones with a fuse coming out the top, and they were going to roll them down the troughs at the people outside when the mob gathered. And it's not impossible that both of these things were in the plans. And so they were preparing for the end. As this mob is gathering around.
Around where? Around?
We're in Lower Manhattan, somewhere.
Offices?
Yeah, around down Wall Street somewhere.
Okay.
Meanwhile, his wife, who lives in Staten Island, so this is back in a weird time in history where a assistant editor at a newspaper would be relatively fabulously wealthy compared to, say, the Irish population.
Right, well, you've got to be literate, and you have to have a lot of privileges to get
so
to
he's
place.
got essentially a small mansion on Staten Island.
A little estate,
with a bunch of Irish servants. And his wife is there, basically alone with their kids. And they're like looking at the Irish servants, and they don't know what to do. And they're finding they're one non-Irish person that they know how to work with, and like, you go bury the silver. And the mobs are coming to burn down all of the Republicans, i.e. abolitionists, i.e. pro-black people's mansions. The Irish mobs are gathering, and these are trained people. These are soldiers on leave from the battles during the Civil War, and they're marching. And so she can hear the sound of the marching feet on the wooden sort of streets along the coast. So the houses are all along the edge of Staten Island, with the kind of marshes, with these boardwalks going through the marshes. And so to get from house to house, you'd go along these boardwalks, and they can hear the people marching on the boardwalk. And my great-great-grandmother turns to her maids and says, what are we going to do? How's this going to go? Because there's more of you than me, and there's a mob coming with torches and guns,
weapons.
And they're like, we are terrified. Let's go. And so they flee, and they run to the neighbors' houses.
So rather than assuming that they were against her, she turned to them and said, "How is this going to go? How do you want this to go?
How do you want this to go?"
That was a good move.
Yeah, exactly. And but they'd already buried the silver, and they're escaping with the maids, and it starts raining. And the mob all goes home.
I was going to say that's the best thing that could have happened.
The best thing that could have happened. The federal troops get called in Manhattan, and the mobs that are burning down Lower Manhattan get surrounded by the federal troops, but they then basically hide and they get shot at. And then the federal troops are then hunting for wounded members of the mob to arrest. But because some of them are soldiers, or many of them are soldiers, and there's been many battles where a lot of people are wounded, they then hide in the hospitals as wounded people from these battles. And there's like 3 days of martial law. Manhattan is closed down by the National Guard. And then Lincoln called in the National Guard to end the whole thing. Then the battle's been put down, and order is restored, and it goes back to it. But yeah, Lincoln almost lost Manhattan to the Irish mobs.
I guess this was when you weigh this against the Civil War,
right? Yeah, it's just a blip.
It gets lost.
Yeah,
but this is amazing.
No, it makes me think of
Lower Manhattan was burning.
Lower Manhattan was burning. Staten Island was about to burn. There was 3 days of curfew, martial law, troops on the streets. It was a crazy, crazy moment.
But you're saying that this was primarily sparked because wealthy New Yorkers were sending Irish people to go die in their place.
and generally they were pro black people and the Irish were generally anti-black people. So they were on two sides of the, almost like the immigrant debate right now.
As in, you're going to bring these people from the South who are going to come take our jobs.
Take our jobs, and you're sending us to die and fight for you to do this. So you are a corrupt elite sending us to die for these people we don't like anyway.
And how did that go for them? It didn't go very well.
Well, a lot of them got shot by the National Guard that Lincoln called out because he's not going to put up with this. But they could have taken Manhattan, and they had deals. The British might well have called it a free port. And the British Navy could have sailed in. Any of this could have happened. It was all being set up.
Until Lincoln decided,
crushed
I'm
it.
To devote some troops.
Yeah. So a lot of this is stories about local power versus state power versus national power. And there's so many different levels of this. And you can see sometimes in Philadelphia, the state won out. And in other times in Manhattan, the feds went out. And in both those cases, that was good. But, now we're seeing things where it could go the other way. And I definitely worry.
I mean, literally, Louisiana has signed an extradition order for a doctor in New York State who prescribed abortion pills to a patient in Louisiana. And they want this doctor extradited. And the governor of New York State is like, that's never going to happen. And this is
what we're talking about. Exactly.
Like, how do we move forward from this?
And we have a mayor of New York saying that the ICE can go, as you said, into the prisons and take people out. Yeah, this is exactly the stuff that's going on.
The only reason he did that is because he now has these charges that have been not done away with, but have been withheld so that he can participate in their political maneuvering.
Oh yeah, he's definitely not getting a pardon.
No, he would have gotten a pardon if
right,
he was going to get a pardon.
And then he would the leash would be gone.
He has a leash.
Yeah.
He has a leash. And this is what you're talking about. This is the interplay of federal power, state power, local power, and all the politics therein. But this is playing out in an intensely dangerous way.
Absolutely.
For, right now, those of us in New York, but this is a clarion call to, states attorneys general across the country and the way business is going to be conducted from now on. I don't want our way out to eat people's lives, both, mentally and physically. Like what you describe required individuals giving themselves up and then an entire civil war. Like
it was what we had done to ourselves as a country, and it was a reckoning that was a long time coming. But there were arguments within like the liberals at the time, so that Horace Greeley, the go west young man, kind of. So he sees the frontier is limitless and not any inhabited at the time, and like go and live there. He thought that we can take our society and move into a brave new world and free the slaves and everything will be great. Whereas Sidney Howard Gay and Frederick Douglass thought that we lived in a fundamentally corrupted society where our own politics was unfixable in its current state and the Constitution needed to be amended. And the Horace Greeley's seem to have won out in that debate, and I love incremental change for the good, and that as long as it keeps moving forward. But because we didn't fix things at that time, I think that's some of the problems we have with what's happening right now. People are just ignore the Constitution.
Well, I mean, I honestly, yes, people are now ignoring the Constitution because it took how many years? It took 100 or so years. How many years since the Civil War? 1865.
140 years
for us to realize that, if we just don't do what the law says, then we don't have to do what the law says.
No, this isn't the first time. It's happened many times. So, Brown versus Board of Education. Right. Johnson had to call in federal troops.
Yes.
And that's what made him say, we've lost the South for a generation. He had it off by like another generation.
Well, again, where I was going with this is that we didn't fully prosecute the Civil War. Like we're still, this is what all of this is about right now today.
Again, a reckoning that was a long time coming, and we didn't finish it because at at its absolute evilest, most poisonous root is the racism that legitimized slavery. We got rid of the slavery and we didn't delegitimize racism. We made it even more scientific. It moved into the mainstream for the next, almost 100 years. And and that's a lot of what MAGA is bringing back. And they use the whole anti-diversity push is basically a way of just saying any black person is incompetent because they were a diversity hire.
It's bigger than that.
Well, I mean, yes.
Anybody who's not white.
Anyone who's not white. Yeah.
It's so much bigger than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the only way out of this is going to be finding different kinds of community. I can't leave the conversation here because it's...
No, I mean, it takes concerted effort over a long time. And, we did end slavery and a lot of people suffered to make that happen. But, that wasn't a thing that happened. And, we can move forward as a country. It might take amending the Constitution.
It doesn't feel like we're moving forward now.
No, not at this particular moment. We're at one of those times like 1855 where, they can just take people off the streets. And this has been made legal. And even if the states don't want it, there's nothing we can do about it. But we will keep moving forward.
Well, we can call our representatives. We can
vigilance committees.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that part of what you were talking about is what happened before is kind of, we're going to have to find ways to do that again.
Yeah, we need to use technology. We need to use social media.
Never heard of vigilance committees, and we have to find ways to use the technology in smarter ways than they can track and get past this.
Yeah.
Well, those were fascinating stories. I did not know that Manhattan almost seceded.
It was close.
Yeah. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Eric.
All right, folks, until next time.
Thank you for listening to Mind Body Evolution with Dr. Josh Stout and Eric Burkell. Go to mindbodyevolution.info for more.